I was terribly touched by Rupa Huq's recent article in The Guardian that presents a reflective and critical examination of her experiences and observations as a Muslim MP in the UK Parliament, particularly in the context of the Labour Party's recent electoral success and its implications for greater diversity and representation. Huq highlights the transformation of the House of Commons atmosphere from the Conservative era to a new one that she describes as optimistic under Labour's new majority, noting the increased diversity, including a record number of Muslim MPs like herself. She recounts, I think this is now her fourth election to the Parliament, so her fourth Parliament, and she recounts her own decision to swear her oath, this time on the Quran, for the first time reflecting a personal and political evolution as opposed to simply standing up and affirming her support for the king. And despite the electoral success, however, she expresses concerns about the hostile and accusatory environment she faced during her campaign, particularly regarding the complex and emotionally charged issue of Gaza. And she criticizes the reductive and aggressive tactics used by some groups, particularly in the Workers' Party, George Galloway's party, which undermined genuine discourse and perpetuates division, the filming of people, and the claques and the ringleaders, and the trolling, effectively, the trolling and the ghosting. We get it on YouTube, and I think the approach there is perhaps a little bit more time and patience to go through people and to thank them for their contribution. But in a hustings, that really isn't always possible, and it's I'm sure it's terribly intimidating. You know, when people say things which are frankly wrong because they've just picked up one small word, because they think you're somebody who you're not, because they think simply because you stand with other people you must support all their views. You don't. I find the distortion of facts very disturbing, and sometimes you have to think, do I correct or do I quietly get on with it? A lot of the time I quietly get on with it because I think to correct is to challenge, and these people are not going to change their mind. They're already locked in their idée fixe, and what will it do? What will it do? It will create a scene, I suppose. That can be interesting sometimes, but sometimes it's so monumentally depressing. You just think, I've got to tighten my belt and get on with it. She also addressed the broader issue of race and representation in politics, particularly in the light of her past fairly abusive comments about Kwasi Kwarteng. If I remember correctly, she claimed that Kwasi Kwarteng was only superficially black, which is an astonishing thing to have said. And the idea that he's superficially black simply isn't true. On the other hand, the fact that he has had a lived experience of privilege that has shaped his politics, and that maybe he has more in common with, for example, old Etonians like Boris Johnson or David Cameron or Jacob Rees-Mogg than, say, with Diane Abbott, Bernie Grant, or even Helen Grant. That is true. But superficial blackness is something I think it is deeply revolting to have said this. And it formed its own racial controversy at a time when I think she was simply trying to be funny. But that really is the essence of racism, that racism is about what people do casually because they think it's okay, and it needs to be called out. I think having said that he was having said that he was superficially black, she then said, if you hear him on the Today programme, you wouldn't know he's black. Well, why would we need to? That's really the point. Our sense of inclusiveness, our sense of community should be blind to that fact. We should hear on the radio. The radio is not defined by the colour of the people who are represented. It's defined by a vocal communication. And I think I love the wireless because of its inclusivity, and I love listening to Radio 4 because there isn't the threat of being assaulted most of the time by music, though increasingly now there are jingles and bits of music all over the place, and B, there's so much that is repeated that it can get a bit tiresome trying even to manage the wireless system, and particularly on via a computer. But I was concerned about her comments on Kwasi Kwarteng, and I think there's many things to be critical of Kwasi. There's many things that one should criticise about Kwasi, but race is not one of them. And her clumsiness, she acknowledges the clumsiness of her previous remarks, and she emphasises the persistent challenges faced by ethnic minorities, which is absolutely true in political and corporate spheres. And she critiques the performative aspects of diversity initiatives that fail to address underlying systemic racism. Absolutely. Drawing a distinction between genuine anti-racist efforts and superficial displays of diversity, tokenism. And I think that's something that we need to guard against. Why does somebody get this advantage simply because of their colour or their gender? Instead, people should be recognised for their merit, irrespective of their background, irrespective of their gender, irrespective of their colour. And we should be making sure that our education system is broad enough to give people the support and the help when and if they want it. And that help, I think, should not be predicated on age or that sort of age structure, which is itself very divisive. People mature at different rates, and people should have an opportunity to return to school, to return to college, to return to university, and to explore the opportunities available as and when they can. We should have far more flexibility in our education, so that we have far more flexibility in the opportunities available to people. And equally, this whole idea that a school timetable needs to be followed, and a university timetable needs to be followed. Actually, if we measure school and we measure university by the degree result, all that needs to be followed is the syllabus. And some people can complete that sooner than others. Some people take longer. We need to find a more flexible way of managing the transmission of syllabuses and the transmission of work. And I think we should be making greater use of interactive media so that teachers are free to monitor and support and to get the best out of students, rather than to be the source and the timing of all of these academic initiatives. I know that I know that she wasn't talking about all this. I'm afraid that's me running off on a bit of a on a bit of a high horse. But yes, in her conclusion, she called for a renewed commitment to rebuilding trust and confidence across diverse communities, acknowledging the difficult path ahead, but affirming the necessity of persistent and principled advocacy. Our effort is important, but we shouldn't just be praising effort. We should be looking towards results. Results are what matters.